Darkness used to kill people. Real darkness, the kind where your own hand vanishes in front of your face. Step outside on a moonless night in 1750, and you could drown in a river 10 steps from your own front door. Now look around you. Street lamps, screens, that little charging dot. Erase every last photon. That blackness was every single night, for everyone, for thousands of years. So what did people actually do all day, and all through that endless night? Oh, you're gonna love this. Let's start with the boss of the pre-electric world. Not a king, not a priest, the sun. When it rose, your day started. Not because you were virtuous, but because daylight was the only light that was free. When it set, the working world simply switched off, like someone pulling the plug on civilization. Every single day. And here's the first thing that should bend your brain. For most of history, the length of an hour changed with the seasons. Many towns divided daylight into 12 slices, so a summer hour was long and lazy, and a winter hour was short and mean. Time itself stretched and shrank. Your great-great-grandparents didn't just have different clocks, they had different time. So how did anyone know what time it was? Bells. The church tower was the town's clock, alarm, calendar, and news service in one. Bells rang you awake, rang you to work, rang you to eat, rang warnings when fire broke out or soldiers appeared. A villager could go a whole life without owning a single timepiece. The sky and the steeple did it all. Dawn on a farm, which is where almost everyone lived, because before machines, roughly 9 out of 10 people worked the land. Tom's commute, opening the door, his breakfast, yesterday's bread, maybe softened in weak ale or milk. Then 12 to 14 hours in season of plowing, sowing, weeding, hauling, work measured not in hours, but until it's done or until it's dark. Millie's day was, if anything, harder. Water didn't come from a tap. It came from a well, one heavy bucket at a time. Bread didn't come from a shop. It came from grain she ground, dough she kneaded, and an oven she fed. Add milking, churning, brewing, salting, spinning, mending, children. The phrase, "a woman's work is never done," wasn't a saying. It was a schedule. And then there was laundry. Not a chore, an event. Wash day happened every few weeks at most, because it took the whole day, hauling and heating water, pounding clothes, wringing by hand. And the detergent? For centuries, stale urine. Its ammonia genuinely cuts grease, so households collected it in pots for wash day. Your ancestors' whites were washed in exactly what you think. And childhood? Short. By 6 or 7 you were scaring crows, feeding chickens, gathering firewood, minding the baby. School, where it existed at all, fitted around the harvest. Which is, by the way, why so many school systems still take a long summer break. Your holidays are a fossil of a world where every small pair of hands was needed in the fields. But don't picture non-stop misery, because here's the shock the textbooks skip. Medieval workers had more days off than you. The church calendar was crammed with feast days, saints' days, and festivals. By some counts, a third of the year was work-free. There were seasons of brutal labor, yes, but there were also whole weeks of eating, dancing, games, and gloriously doing not much. What did everyone drink? Mostly small beer. Ale so weak it barely counted as alcohol. Brewed at home, drunk by everyone, including children, because it was calories and flavor in a safe package. And no, contrary to the internet's favorite myth, medieval people did drink water too. They knew a clean spring from a foul ditch. The beer wasn't fear. The beer was lunch. The rhythm of everything was the seasons. Spring, plow and pray. Summer, the long green wait. Then the harvest sprint, where the whole village worked like their lives depended on it. Because they did. Autumn, slaughter, salt, store. And winter. Winter was the season that explains everything else about this story. Because winter was dark. First, the market. Once a week, the nearest town square exploded into the medieval internet. Buying, selling, gossip, news, matchmaking, marveling at a stranger's pig. For a villager, market day was the feed refresh. Everything that happened in the world arrived by mouth in a crowd on market day. Miss it, and you were a week behind on literally everything. And news? News traveled at the speed of a horse, a sail, or a pair of legs, and not one step faster. A king could be 3 weeks dead before your village heard. Wars ended while soldiers kept fighting. Whole towns celebrated victories that had already turned into defeats. Every piece of information you got was by definition old. The past didn't just feel far away, even the present was far away. Now, the sun goes down. And before we talk about what people did at night, you have to understand what night was. No glow on the horizon, no lit windows across the valley. On a moonless, cloudy night, you could not see your own hand touching your own nose. People fell into ditches, rivers, and each other. Stepping outside after dark was, quite genuinely, a survival decision, which made the moon a public utility. A full moon meant travel, visits, even parties. Moonlight was infrastructure. Dinner invitations were scheduled by the lunar calendar. And in the 1700s, a famous club of scientists and industrialists in Birmingham deliberately met on nights near the full moon so members could ride home alive. They called themselves, wonderfully, the Lunar Society. Fire was the other lifeline and the other terror. In towns built of timber and thatch, one knocked candle could erase a street by morning. So every evening, a bell rang to tell everyone, rake up your hearth, cover your flames, go to bed. The French called it couvre-feu, cover fire. Say it fast, couvre-feu, curfew. That word in your language is a 1,000-year-old fire safety rule. We'll meet that bell again. So, pitch black world, fires banked, doors barred. Surely everyone just slept? No. And here's where this story gets properly strange. Because the night hid two of history's oddest secrets, a way of sleeping so different from ours, it sounds invented. And centuries later, an actual paid profession of people whose entire job was throwing things at your bedroom window. Both are real. The evening indoors had a name in France, the veille. One fire, one room, everyone in it, because light and heat were too precious to split between rooms. Neighbors crowded in and pooled their light. The women spun wool, the men mended tools, and someone always told stories. This firelit circle is where fairy tales lived for centuries before anyone wrote them down. And the entertainment was genuinely good. Riddles and rude jokes, songs everyone knew by heart, card games and dice, gossip and ghost stories, the scarier the better, with the wind doing the sound effects for free. If you think of it as a world without entertainment, you have it exactly backwards. It was a world where everyone made the entertainment, every night, together. Let's talk about the light itself, because light before electricity was wealth, burned by the minute. The best light came from beeswax candles, clean, bright, lovely, and so expensive that mostly the church and the rich burned them. A working family lit their whole evening with something far humbler, and honestly, far grimmer. Tallow, rendered animal fat. Tallow candles were cheapish, but they guttered, they smoked, and they filled the room with the aroma of burning mutton. Cheaper still was the rushlight, a dried marsh reed dipped in kitchen grease, burning maybe 20 smoky minutes. That was the family's evening, one greasy reed's worth of light at a time. Now you know why they all shared one fire. Do the sums, and light becomes the most expensive ordinary thing in the house. Historians of energy have estimated that an hour of decent artificial light could cost a laborer a serious bite of a day's wages. Where today, it costs you less than a blink's worth. So nobody left a light on. Light was rationed like food because it practically was food. It was burned fat, which is why night work happened by firelight, moonlight, or feel. Fishermen mended nets by the hearth. Bakers, the great exception, worked while everyone slept, so towns woke to fresh bread. And spinners spun endless thread in the half-dark, which some argue is why spinster became the word for an unmarried woman. Spinning was the work always waiting for spare female hands. Out in that blackness, towns weren't unguarded. Enter the watchman, the night's official adult. From dusk, he patrolled with lantern and staff, calling the hours, 12 o'clock and all's well. Part clock, part police, part weather app, and let's be honest, from the records, part sleepy old man with a pole. London's watchmen were nicknamed Charlies, and comedy writers mocked them for 2 straight centuries. City nights had one more piece of infrastructure. Children. In London, link boys waited outside taverns with burning torches, and for a small coin walked you home through the black, a human streetlight for hire. Grand houses even had iron cones by the door for snuffing the torch out on arrival. Some are still there, next to doorbells, like fossils of the dark. Was the night dangerous? Yes, and not mainly because of monsters, Thieves loved the dark, so did open cellar doors, rivers, and wells. Cities like Paris eventually hung lanterns in the streets partly as crime control, and people caught breaking them faced serious punishment because smashing a streetlight was smashing public safety itself. But people also genuinely believed the night belonged to something else. Ghosts, witches, demons, the restless dead, respectable adults, up to and including kings, took these as fact. Darkness wasn't just the absence of light, it was presence. When the sun went down, the other world clocked in. That fear shaped bedtimes, prayers, and which roads you would absolutely not take. So the curfew bell, remember couvre-feu, wasn't oppression so much as a nightly ritual sealing the world shut. Fires covered, doors barred, shutters closed, town gates literally locked. The community tucked itself in like one enormous nervous family, and the night outside was left to the watchmen, the bakers, the foxes, and the dead. And then everyone slept, sort of. Bedtime itself deserves a word, because bed is generous. A frame strung with ropes, a mattress stuffed with straw, and the whole family in it together. Parents, children, sometimes a lodger, occasionally a well-loved pig in the room for warmth. Privacy wasn't lost at night, because it had never existed. Sharing a bed was as normal as sharing a table. A word on what sleeping actually felt like. The straw mattress rustled, compacted into lumps, and hosted a lively ecosystem. Fleas and bedbugs were simply roommates. Pillows were logs or grain sacks for most of history. And that phrase, sleep tight, people love to say it comes from tightening these very bed ropes. It's almost certainly a charming myth, but one look at the sagging ropes and you'll see exactly why the story stuck. Comfort, like light, was a luxury good, and yet people slept, because bone-tired is the best mattress ever invented. Winter made the dark almost total. In Northern Europe, a December day gives you 8 hours of gray light and 16 of night. 16 hours, every single night, for months. No screens, no books for most, one fire, one rushlight. It sounds unbearable. And this is where the strangest secret of the pre-electric world comes in. Because with 16 hours of night and maybe 8 hours of sleep in you, the maths doesn't work. What filled the gap? For centuries, the answer was so ordinary that nobody thought to explain it. They just lived it. It only survives in passing mentions in court records, diaries, prayer books, and novels. And when a modern historian finally noticed the pattern, it rewrote what we thought sleep even was. Historian Roger Eckerk, digging through centuries of documents, kept tripping over two phrases: first sleep and second sleep. Not poetic flourishes, practical, everyday terms, used the way we'd say, lunch break. People went to bed soon after dark, slept a few hours, and then, around midnight, they woke up. On purpose. All of them. The hour or so in between had its own gentle life. People lay thinking or praying. Prayer books included special midnight prayers. Couples talked in the dark, and well, marriages got worked on. Some got up, tended the fire, checked the animals, finished a chore, even slipped next door to visit a neighbor who was, of course, also awake. Midnight had a social scene. Court records mention it matter-of-factly. Witnesses saying a crime happened after first sleep. Doctors even wrote that the time between the two sleeps was good for quiet reflection. Nobody called it insomnia, because it wasn't a problem. Waking at midnight wasn't a malfunction. For most of history, it was simply the shape of the human night. So if you've ever snapped awake at 3 a.m. and stared at the ceiling feeling broken, you may just be running very old software. When researchers took modern volunteers and removed artificial light for weeps, their sleep famously split into 2 blocks with a calm waking gap between. The 2-sleep night didn't die because humans changed. It died because the night got bright. And morning came brutally early either way. Which raises a very practical question. In a world where clocks were rare and alarm clocks barely existed, how did a factory-age worker wake up on time? The answer is the single best job title in this entire story: the knocker-upper. In Britain's industrial towns, well into the 20th century, knocker-uppers walked the dawn streets waking paying customers, tapping bedroom windows with long poles, or, in the case of one famous London knocker-upper, firing dried peas at the glass from a shooter. A human alarm clock, a few pennies a week. Miss the knock, lose your shift. And yes, people immediately asked the obvious riddle. Who knocks up the knocker-upper? Contemporaries joked about it in verse. The practical answers. Some simply stayed up through the night shift. Some had arrangements with police on their beats. And some, presumably, had extremely good internal clocks and nerves of iron. The profession only fully died out in some cities in the 1970s. Now, the world starts to change, and it changes with light. First came gas. From the early 1800s, pipes crept under city streets, and gas lamps bloomed along them, lit each dusk by lamplighters with long poles. For the first time in human history, whole streets glowed all night, every night. Diarists wrote about it like a miracle. Night in the city had been switched on. Cities got drunk on light. Shops stayed open late. Theaters, restaurants, and pleasure gardens blazed. Nightlife, the word and the thing, is a gaslight invention. Some places went further. A handful of cities raised colossal iron towers, crowned with blinding arc lamps, trying to replace the moon itself with a bigger, better electric one. Keep those towers in mind. Then, in 1879, a rumpled American inventor got a carbon filament to glow steadily inside a glass vacuum, and unlike gas, it didn't flicker, smoke, or occasionally explode. Thomas Edison didn't invent the idea of electric light, but he made it practical. And then he did the truly historic thing. He built the system to deliver it. Wires, meters, power station, and all. In 1882, his Pearl Street station in New York switched on and fed electric light to a few dozen buildings in lower Manhattan. The first spark of the electric grid you're using this second. Within a generation, wires webbed the cities. Within 2, they reached the farms. The 10,000-year reign of the sun over human time was ending. One bulb at a time. The lamplighters themselves became beloved figures, climbing their ladders at dusk, dousing at dawn, greeting the whole street by name. And here's the detail I love. They never fully left. London still peeps over 1,000 working gas lamps today, tended by a tiny crew of modern lamplighters. In a city of LEDs, a handful of Victorian flames are still being lit by hand every single night. And those moon towers, Austin, Texas still has some. Real Victorian moonlight towers, over a century old, still casting their glow. Fossils of the exact moment humanity decided the night sky's lighting was inadequate and voted to install a better moon. When you see one, you're looking at the hinge between the black night of all previous history and yours. But the light didn't just banish the dark. It quietly deleted the world we've spent this whole story in. Factories no longer had to stop at sunset, so shift work marched into the night, and humans began working against their own body clocks at industrial scale. The sun was fired as timekeeper and replaced by the clock, the whistle, and the rota. And electricity took its time reaching everyone. Cities blazed by 1900, but the countryside waited decades. Huge stretches of rural America only got power lines in the 1930s and 40s. Plenty of European villages waited just as long. Which means this isn't ancient history at all. There are people alive right now who remember the exact evening the first bulb lit their family farmhouse. The veillée faded. Why crowd around one fire when every room could be lit? The ghost stories moved into books, then screens. The watchman became the streetlight and the police patrol. The knocker-upper became the alarm clock, and the two sleeps quietly fused into one, as bright evenings pushed bedtime later and squeezed the old midnight waking out of existence. Within a couple of generations, people forgot it had ever been normal. People felt the loss even then. Writers mourned the vanished dark. Astronomers watched the stars dissolve into city glow. The Milky Way, humanity's nightly ceiling for 100,000 years, quietly disappeared from over the cities within a lifetime. Most people alive today have never actually seen it. Not because it left, because we drowned it. Even boredom is part of the story. In a world where light was precious and evenings were shared, nothing to do barely existed as a concept. There was always the fire, the circle, the story, the mending. The modern feeling of being bored alone, brightly lit with infinite options. That's not ancient human experience. That's an invention, and a very recent one. So, what did people do all day before electricity? They worked with the sun and rested with the dark. They pooled their light, their heat, and their stories. They slept twice, prayed at midnight, visited neighbors in nightcaps, paid a woman to shoot peas at their window, scheduled their parties by the moon, and locked the whole town up at the sound of a bell whose name you still say. Curfew. None of it was simple, and plenty of it was hard, cold, and frightening. But it was a way of being human that lasted 10,000 years, and it vanished in about 50. Almost nobody alive now has ever experienced a truly dark night, a truly shared evening, or the quiet hour between two sleeps. We didn't just gain the light, we traded a whole world for it. Here's the button. Tonight, when you flick a switch without thinking, you're performing what a medieval villager would call a miracle, summoning noon at midnight for less than a heartbeat's wages. But somewhere behind that switch, the old night is still there, waiting in every power cut. And the next time you wake at 3 a.m. for no reason at all, maybe it isn't no reason. Maybe it's just your first sleep ending, right on time, a few centuries late. We made a whole episode on exactly that. Why, for thousands of years, every single person woke in the dead of night on purpose, and the strange, cozy things they got up to. It's on the screen right now. Go and meet your ancestors at midnight. Sleep well, or better yet, sleep twice.